Alright, what's up guys? In today's video we are doing a one-round mock draft. We will break down every situation, we will discuss trade possibilities, and the whole nine. And with 31 picks to dive into, let's begin. So with Carolina on the clock, we all know what they gave up to move up to number 1. All signs are pointing to CJ Stroud being the number 1 overall pick. And I'm not going to be bold and give them Will Levis at number 1 overall or Anthony Richardson. I think it's pretty simple. CJ Stroud, as of now, to me, is the pick. And I think the Texans are in a situation where we will give them the quarterback that's not drafted number 1. So if Bryce is the number 1 pick, they'll take CJ. But in this scenario, since CJ went number 1 overall, we give them Bryce Young. And for the first 2 picks, I don't think there needs to be this, high-level analysis of, oh, well, what if, they want to trade? No, I think it's very simple. Quarterbacks 1 and 2, and I think it's going to be CJ and then Bryce. But the Arizona Cardinals at number 3 is an interesting situation because we can look at a lot of teams that want to trade up. Now, Kansas City, they don't have the capital move up to 31-3, but I think Arizona would want to trade down because they need better football players. Just within the past couple months alone, they lost J.J. Watt to retirement, they lost Zach Allen to free agency, and they lost Byron Murphy in free agency as well. So Arizona, they were already a bad football team. They're in one of the worst situations in football because 2023 is going to basically be a punt for them. They're not going to compete this year. So Jonathan Gannon needs a playmaker on his defense. He needs a guy to build around. And I think Will Anderson fits that bill. So I think ideally they would like to trade down to 7 with the Raiders because it's out of conference and hopefully they could get another 1, but the Raiders did not want to move up in this scenario. Quite frankly, I don't blame the Raiders for not wanting to move up. So we give the Arizona Cardinals Will Anderson. Next up is the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of quarterbacks have been mocked in this situation, and I don't think it's as simple as, all right, we'll just give them Will Levis so we can play with Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Jelani Woods, and the whole 9. Brett Coleman recently did a video on the Lamar Jackson situation and how ownership needs to have a lot of money set aside. Really great video, recommend checking that out. And I honestly think there's a chance Lamar goes to Indy. However, I'm not going, I don't think they're going to give up the number 4 overall pick for Lamar, and I think it would be a 2024 and 2025 first, because this trade could still happen in June, and they could still have this trade happen after the draft, which would then be the ensuing 2 first-round picks. So in this scenario, with that in the back of our mind, I think Indy would want to build the defensive line, and if you have a defensive line of Tyree Wilson, Kwity Paye, of course, DeForest Buckner, and Grover Stewart, that's a very, very scary defensive line, and there is still a good possibility that Lamar could become a Colt down the road. So I like that possibility, or I like that scenario for Indy, and that is what we are going with in today's mock. Next up is Seattle. I don't think there's any possibility they trade out of this selection. Pete Carroll, John Schneider, they're not afraid to take players with character concerns, and I think especially with how they got bullied in the run game last year, especially towards the end of the season, Carolina came in, put up 30 points on them. Sam Darnold only threw for 120 yards in that game, and they won. And they didn't just win. I mean, they dominated in the trenches. So Jalen Carter, hopefully that works out, but Jalen Carter, and the thing with Seattle and why I like Jalen Carter going number 5, they still have a first-round pick at 20. So them having a top 5 pick, and the same thing applies to Detroit here at 6, it's not risk-free, but it's as risk-free of a top 5 or 6 selection as you're ever going to have because they have a first-round pick later in the draft. So Seattle is in a position where they can take that risk. And by the way, there was no shot I was going to give Hendon Hooker to Seattle at 5. I saw that in a mock recently. I don't think that's a possibility. Detroit is up at 6. You have to win the division, and they've taken a lot of steps this offseason so far to beat the Vikings, which they did in week 14 of last year, by the way. They signed Cam Sutton, they signed Emmanuel Mosley, granted he is coming off of a torn ACL, and a player that I love mocking to Detroit, and it makes a lot of sense, is corner Christian Gonzalez. He will play his rookie season at just 21 years old. There is no pressure on Gonzalez to come in and be the guy right from the start. Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn are not going to say, Christian, we need you to go one-on-one, island with Justin Jefferson 2 times a year, and we need you to hold him to less than 30 yards. Because, one, nobody's saying that to their corners, and two, there's a lot of veterans above Christian Gonzalez that will help him acclimate to the league, like Jeff Okudah, who has been a disappointment since being drafted number 3 overall back in 2020, and Jeff can, basically say to Christian, here's what went wrong for me, here's what I've learned, and I love the possibility of Christian coming in, learning behind Okudah, learning behind Cam Sutton, and of course Emmanuel Mosley, who is coming off of a torn ACL. So I like Detroit's, I like the possibility of Gonzalez going there, and in this mock, it was either him or Devon Witherspoon. Now, next up is the Las Vegas Raiders. As you can see, team need quarterback. I think they're pretty committed to Jimmy at this point in time, and I don't think they're going to put Jimmy in a situation that he was in over the past few years in San Francisco, like, hey, Jimmy, we just gave up 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance. No pressure, of course, so just do your job, but no pressure. We only spent 3 first-round picks on Trey Lance. Anyway, I don't think the Raiders are going to do that, given what Jimmy just went through, and I think they genuinely believe in him, and I do think the Broncos will be back. And of course, there's 2 pretty good quarterbacks in the division, of course, in Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. You need, as much as they need offensive line help, and as much as you can make a case for Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski here, I think they would go Devon Witherspoon in this situation. Now, if you want to go tackle, I'm fine with that, but in this mock, we are giving them Devon Witherspoon. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons. And I would like to trade out here just because I don't think they're going to go Levis or Richardson. They seem very, very committed to Desmond Ridder. Steelers want to trade up from 17 to 8. That's a steep, steep ask. I also have the trade value chart on another screen here. Of course, NFL teams don't operate and basically use it like a checkbook and say, oh, well, you need to get this up 50 points or nothing like that. But to give you an idea of how much the difference is, we're talking about a 450-point difference, which to move up would be the 45th overall pick for the Steelers. So we would need 1749 for 8. And of course, this trade will likely be accepted. We would want a little more, so I think we would also try for 120. I think the Steelers would want 159 back. I don't think they would want to go from 80 to 234 with no pick. So we get we get 1749 and 120, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock. Dan Moore has been a nightmare over the past few years. He's given up 7 sacks in each of the last couple seasons, and over the remainder of the 2022 season, the last couple weeks, we saw offensive coordinator Matt Canada roll Kenny out to the right, basically to not put Dan Moore in those situations. So it's pretty simple. We are going to give them the best tackle in the draft. I think that is Paris Johnson from Ohio State. And the tackle run, if you can't tell, is about to start. Chicago needs offensive line help. What better player to give them than Illinois' own Peter Skoronski? Now, I do know Peter grew up a Packers fan, but he did go to Northwestern, which is right in Chicago's backyard. So I like Peter Skoronski to the Bears a lot. Now, this is a very tough situation for Philly because there's no interior offensive lineman that's worth the number 10 overall pick. I don't think they would trade back. I don't think they would trade with the Jets and try to get like a 2 whenever there's not a lot of holes on this roster to begin with. I think it's a little rich for Kalijah Kancey, and I think that would kind of be forcing a pick. In this situation, you have 2 players that I think stand out in a big way here. I love Quentin Johnston. I love Jackson Smith-Njigba to the Eagles because I think it would be in a scenario where, look, we have A.J. Brown, we have Devonta Smith, we have Jalen Hurts, who is a very, very good dual-threat quarterback, borderline top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think he is in the top 5 personally. Why don't we just make our offense completely unstoppable? So we have A.J. Brown, we have Smitty, and then you have a choice between Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think I would go JSN in this situation, and it's kind of a pick by, where else are we going to go? And it's a very tough situation because there's no interior offensive lineman, a top 10 pick. I think it's a little rich for Kancey this early, but you can have an offense that puts up 35 a game and basically say, stop us. All right, next up, Tennessee. They need offensive line in the worst way. I wouldn't have minded them trading up to pick 8 to get Paris Johnson. I would have actually preferred that, but on the mock, they did not want to trade up. So they need receiver or offensive line help in the worst way. I like Anton Harrison quite a bit, and I think he would be the selection here. I will take a look at the other receivers. Quentin Johnston is available. Zay Flowers is available. I think it's a little rich for him, but I do think in this specific scenario, I think they would go with Anton Harrison. Next up is the Houston Texans, and I really like what they've done so far, just as a team in whole. You know, they had DeMeco Ryans, one of the best head coaching options available. Loved that for them. They also added Dalton Schultz in free agency, Robert Woods. Granted, he's not the player he was 5 years ago, but I like what the Texans are doing. And in this situation, it's kind of BPA to help out your quarterback in Bryce Young. And I think, you know, hopefully John Mechie comes back this year. They also have Nico Collins. I think Quentin Johnston would be the best player available. They also have running back Dameon Pierce. So pretty quickly, we're looking at a filled-out Texans offense. Next up is the New York Jets. I don't think they will trade this pick for Aaron Rodgers. I think it's pretty simple here. Broderick Jones is the best player or best tackle available, which they certainly need. He played left tackle. He's a 2-time national champion. So Broderick Jones, you are a New York Jet. Which, by the way, leaves us in a very, very tricky situation here for the New England Patriots, because the offensive tackles are now, I mean, once that tackle run starts, they're off the board quick. I don't want to take DeJuan Jones at 14 overall. I think Lucas Van Ness is a very Patriots pick, and I mean that in the best way possible. I will look at the trade-ups, or the trade-downs, to see, you know, what's there. And I don't think the Ravens, I am going to take a quick look at the chart here. The Ravens 22 is worth 780. The Patriots 14 is worth 1100. So we're looking at a difference of 320. 320 is equivalent to the 58th overall pick. So I don't think they would trade a future 2 to move up 8 spots. I really don't. The Patriots, again, and quarterback is not a team need for the Patriots, so I'm definitely not going to take Will Levis or Anthony Richardson here. This is one of the toughest picks to have. Ultimately, we are going to go with Lucas Van Ness. I think that's, and I mean that in the best way. I think it's a very Patriots pick. He's going to come in, probably be a solid player for 6 to 7 years, and with Judon and Josh Uche, that's going to be hell to block. So I like Lucas Van Ness, and I think it might be a little early for Zay Flowers, but I just don't see the Ravens trading a 2 next year to move up to go from 22 to 14, especially when they don't have a 2 this year due to the Roquan Smith trade. Next up, the Green Bay Packers. Again, they're not going to take a quarterback with Jordan Love. So it's pretty simple. We're going to do something for Jordan Love that we never did for Aaron Rodgers, and we are going to give him a security blanket. Personally, I don't think there's an 11-spot difference between Kincaid and Mayer. I think that's a little disrespectful to Michael Mayer, and actually I do think that Mayer is a better prospect than Kincaid. We're going to give him a safety blanket. We are ultimately going to go with Michael Mayer to the Green Bay Packers, and we're not going to make that same mistake with Jordan Love that we did with Aaron Rodgers. We're not going to make him go 17 years without a first-round offensive weapon. So, like that pick for the Packers quite a bit, which leaves us with the Washington Commanders on the clock. And I think this is actually difficult because Will Levis is on the clock. He's on the board, and in most situations, he's not. Joey Porter is also on the board. They had Taylor Heineke leave in free agency. They need to do something, and with presumably new ownership, I think in this situation, I really think they would go with Will Levis if he's on the board in that situation. New ownership, new era. I could also see them by the way, alternative pick for the Commanders would have been Joey Porter Jr. That would have been their other pick. The Atlanta Falcons are on the clock. And like we said when they were on the clock at pick 8, I don't think they're going to go with the quarterback. And we have 17, 44, and 49. And I did want to briefly discuss that Steelers trade. I don't think the Steelers would have a problem moving up from 17 to 8 because they still have pick 32 from the Chase Claypool trade. So I know some Steelers fans might be like, why did you make the trade to begin with? That's why. They still have 32, and they did not give up 32 to move up 9 spots. The Falcons are on the clock. And I think in this scenario, like, look, they need defensive line. Well, not just defensive line, they need defense. I think Brian Branch makes a ton of sense. They have, of course, A.J. Terrell. They signed Jesse Bates in free agency. They also have Richie Grant, who is entering his 3rd year. So it's You know, do we want to go Kalijah Kancey, or do we kind of really just want to soup out the secondary and give them Joey Porter, AJ Terrell? I like any of these players here. Personally, I think they would go Joey Porter in this scenario, because if you have Joey Porter and AJ Terrell, that is hell for opposing offenses every single week to game plan against for Porter and Terrell both. So I like that pick for Atlanta quite a bit. Next up is the Detroit. I'm sorry, guys. I saw this in a video, I saw all the comments. The Detroit Lions. I got to focus on the pronunciation. I'm sorry. Detroit is on the clock. I think this is an underrated receiver spot. I don't think they would go tight end after trading TJ Hawkinson. I know Kincaid is there. I like the possibility of them going either Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison. I mean, if you pair them with Jameson Williams, that's not fun. I mean, that is simply not fun, especially with the offensive line that they have. And unfortunately, Quentin Johnson already is off the board. But I do think Detroit going with receiver is an underrated possibility. I don't think they will in this scenario. And with Kalijah Kancey staring them right in the face, I think that's who they would go with. You know, Kalijah Kancey, Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston coming off the edge. He had a quiet 8-sack year last year. So Kalijah Kancey is a Detroit Lion. And again, I'm working on that. I'm sorry, guys. Tampa is on the clock. Guys, there's almost no mock where it ever works out like this. Obviously, they need help at tackle, but I don't think DeJuan Jones is going. I don't think he's going 19 overall to Tampa. And how often are you going to have a weapon like Anthony Richardson available? I mean, this is, in terms of the opportunity, not to say he's a once-in-a-lifetime player. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now, the player's not, but you get what I'm saying there. Like, I'm not saying like Anthony Richardson's the next, like, you know, whatever prospect, like Trevor Lawrence, where he just, you know, sucked in his first year because of a lot of other things, but then boomed in his second year. But what I'm saying is the opportunity's not going to be there. And I think in this scenario, I personally, if Tampa doesn't take Anthony Richardson, I think Seattle would with the very next pick. So I think Anthony Richardson, you are a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. I know that might be a spicy one. I think in Tampa in that situation, especially with Baker Mayfield coming in, I think they would have a little bit of time for Anthony to develop. And if you give him Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, you are alleviating as much risk as you possibly can. And I still think that Tampa would go offensive line in the second round. All right, next up, Seattle is on the clock. With Seattle's first pick, we gave them Jalen Carter. And with Geno Smith now under center for presumably the next couple years, and with no quarterbacks going in the first round, I'm not giving them Hendon Hooker. I think you have to do as much as you can to help out Geno. And if Tyler Lockett goes down, that offense is not what it is with Lockett. Like, it makes a big difference. So this is a player that, or a mock that I like doing to them. I like giving them a receiver, whether it's Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers. We are going to give them Jordan Addison in today's mock. I like both players to them. I think there's a very good chance that Seattle goes receiver with their second first-round pick. All right, next up, the Chargers. Now, I saw a comment recently in a video, and I released a video on Wednesday that said why running backs should be drafted in the first round. Austin Eckler once traded. We've seen, you know, a lot of production from running backs recently. Najee Harris was a first-round pick. He had over 1,600 total yards in his rookie season. I know people are going to say, you know, Najee's not as, you know, he's not a top 5 back, which I get, but a player that could easily come in and be not only a 1,000-yard back from day one, which he would be, assuming he stays healthy. I cannot say enough how much I love the possibility of Bijan Robinson becoming a Charger. You know, you only have a couple more years of Justin Herbert on that rookie contract. Justin Herbert is rightfully so going to get a contract north of $200 million. He's going to receive a bag. You have to help him in any way you can. Not just from a receiving standpoint, but from a, hey, you know, it's 2nd and 3. Let's just get this first down. Okay, Bijan, here, pick up 6 for us. Bijan Robinson is a Charger. I love that pick, and like I said, I want to specifically shout out the person that commented that a couple days ago because it makes so much sense for Bijan to be a Charger. Next up, Baltimore Ravens. There's 2 options here. I think there's 2 options. Number 1, well, in no order, sorry. The 2 options are Deonte Banks and Zay Flowers. I'm fine with either for them. The way that I see it is I think you need to give the quarterback in 2023, whether that's Lamar or someone else, I think you need to give them as much help as you possibly can, and I think that would be Zay Flowers in this mock. And which leaves us with the Minnesota Vikings, and Deonte Banks is staring them right in the face. This defense was not good last year for several reasons. Deonte Banks, his floor is the Minnesota Vikings. Like, that is as far as he will fall. All right, next up is the Jags. And again, another player that's staring them right in the face is Brian Branch. You're in the AFC now, and you're not the same old cellar dweller Jags. Like, you won a playoff game last year. You need to compete with the other teams in the AFC, so we give them Brian Branch. The New York Giants, I'd love to give them a receiver. I think it's a little early for Josh Downs. They traded for Darren Waller, so Kincaid will not be drafted here. So we're kind of in no man's land for the Giants. They're not going to trade with Philly. But we're kind of in no man's land, so do we reach on Josh Downs? I know I literally just said it's a little early for him, but they don't need defensive line help. I'm not the biggest fan of giving them O'Cyrus Torrence, or even, we're not going center in round 1, but I'm not the biggest fan of giving them an interior offensive line. So we're in a very tough situation, and I think this pick, just by, BPA at position of need, would be Josh Downs. Get Daniel Jones some help. You gave him that big contract for a reason. So, like that pick, and Josh Downs is a Giant. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, and this is a tougher pick than you might think. And honestly, I would love to give them Jahmyr Gibbs to pair with Tony Pollard, because I think it alleviates a lot of the pressure on Pollard. Pollard had 1,300 yards last year, and he got hurt in the playoffs, which was not his fault, by the way. I'm not trying to imply that it was, but you need fresh feet, and as much as you can possibly be fresh that late in the season. So I love the possibility of giving them Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'd love to give them a receiver too, but this is a really, really tough situation for the Cowboys. We're not trading with Philly either. And I have mocked them Bijan before. I'm not as comfortable as mocking them. Jahmyr Gibbs as I am Bijan Robinson. And I think in this scenario, I think we would probably go best player available, and I think we would go with Brian Brzee from Clemson. Sorry, voice cut out there a little bit. All right, next up, Buffalo Bills. Actually, this is a very simple pick. We saw what happened last year in the playoff game. Cincinnati manhandled them. DeJuan Jones, guys, if you are not familiar with DeJuan Jones, here's what I want you to look at right here. 6'8", 374. He is one of my favorite prospects in the class. I love DeJuan Jones. There's a chance I do a whole video on him. I think he is going to be a good starter for some time. DeJuan Jones to Buffalo makes a lot of sense, and really, really helps them in the trenches. Cincinnati Bengals. There's a couple of options that I like here. By the way, Nolan Smith is still on the board, which is unintentional. With the Cincinnati Bengals, I think it's very much, it's a situation similar to what we did at 10 with Jackson Smith-Njigba. It is very much, and I know they just signed Irv Smith, by the way, but Irv Smith, I watched him for 4 years in Minnesota. I don't think he's going to be the long-term answer for them. Irv is only 24 years old, but I don't think he is for sure the long-term guy. Mazi Smith is on, he's a possibility as well. Nolan Smith is, of course, an option. I know they have Trey Hendrickson, but, in that conference, you can never have enough pass rush. But if you have Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Dalton Kincaid, good luck. I mean, it's very much like we already know we're good. We're going to become even better. Good luck stopping us. Because other defenses, I mean, you have to draft to stop Jamar Chase, like we said, Jamar T, Tyler Boyd, Kincaid, Joe Mixon, they're probably going to get another running back at some point, but I like the possibility of Kincaid in that offense. Next up, the New Orleans Saints. I'd love to give them a receiver to help out Derek Carr. I'm not a fan of Tank Dell at number 29 to the Saints. I'm really not. They also lost Marcus Davenport in free agency. I know he had half a sack last year, so it's not like he was a huge contributor for them. But if you have Nolan Smith as a pass rusher, he can learn the ropes from Cam Jordan, who's probably a future Hall of Famer. I think it's very much just a BPA for GM Mickey Loomis in that situation, and I like that. I like the possibility of that for them quite a bit. All right, next up is the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, we're in a BPA situation. They don't need a center. They drafted Cam Jurgens last year to be the successor of Jason Kelce. So they're not going to trade out of the first round either because it simply doesn't make sense. The players that I'm looking at here, I'm looking at a corner in Emmanuel Forbes. The corner run, once it goes, guys, it goes. And Cam Smith has been mocked in the first round. I don't think Philly would take him at 30. In this situation, I think it's BPA, and I don't think any Eagles fans would be upset about getting Myles Murphy at 30 overall. So you get the 5th-year option. I don't think that's a bad option for them at all, and I like that pick quite a bit, which leaves us with the Kansas City Chiefs. They released Frank Clark this offseason, and you always have to get after the pass rusher in this conference. I would love to give them a receiver. Unfortunately, like I said, no great receiver, or I mean, not that they're not going to be good, but I don't want to give up the 31st overall pick for these guys. So I think that leaves us with Will McDonald. That is who we are going with to end today's mock, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Cannot thank you guys enough for 70,000 subscribers. And like I said, if you guys enjoyed, please like the video, subscribe. It helps tremendously. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.